Connor coming?
He'll be late.
He'll be late.
All right. It is January 9th at the Policy Review Committee meeting at 7 p.m. In attendance is Frank Sermonaro, Mrs. Hamels, Mr. McAmoyle, Mr. Haas, Dr. Rado, and Mr. Basil.
And one member of the audience and the press.
One member of the audience, which is the press. And Connor, Mr. Kurtz, will be attending, but he's running a little late. So could you sign in, please, before you get a chance? The agenda, if you don't mind, I had asked Dr. Otto if we could kind of swap things on the agenda to put the communication policy up first, because Mr. Haas is here and he has done some research on it. And in the event that I have to leave early to pick up these kids, I wanted us to have that discussion first. So if you don't mind, Dr. Otto, if we can talk about that first?
You're the chair.
Great. Mr. Haas, can you fill everybody in on some of the discussions we've had? He did some research on the Connect Ed issue that I was pretty big on. Why don't we make use of that Connect Ed for some things? And he's done some research on that. He could fill us in. It's not so cut and dry. But then he's researched some of the other things that we had found on the internet, Andrew, and he's got some updates on that as well.
And I just wanted to, before he starts that, just for clarification, because I think there's some miscommunication or misunderstanding that with the users of this policy. This policy is in full effect right now, and there are no waivers, there are no waiting to get something in place. What we're trying to do is put eventually in place an administrative guideline that explains how it would be implemented. But there's an expectation that none of the behavior that's listed in the policy at this point occur. So in case anyone has other ideas about that, we may ultimately get to some kind of waiver or whatever as we go through and develop the administrative regulation connected to this policy, but we are not there yet. So I've made sure the principals are aware of that. And as a matter of fact, we just had an administrative council meeting this morning, and this was on the agenda. And Mr. Hawes did give an update on what he was going to be sharing here tonight. So I just wanted to preface his comments with that to make it very clear that this policy is in full effect. We're not waiting to put this policy in place.
Okay.
So first, I'm just going to review a couple things as I understand them, since I haven't been present here to hear things firsthand before. But as I understand it, there's, I'd say, 3 or 4 primary areas that we're looking to put in or look at alternatives for the texting to occur between employees and students. The first one, probably the most important, would be that any communication that occurs between an employee and student or students would be something that would be accessible probably by myself or my department in some form of an archive, much like we have for email, so that if there is any kind of investigation, we would have access to all that information. So that's one assumption, and I'd appreciate if you correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that so far so good.
So that's kind of probably the biggest one, because it's going to make it the most difficult. The second one would be the goal is to allow two-way communication, SMS or similar communication between an employee and student on a basic cell phone, since we know that at least a significant number of students and potentially employees do not have a smartphone. A solution that would require that on both sides is probably not feasible. So that, in my opinion, would disqualify anything. And the third one...
as you go through them, I would say that that's accurate as well. One of the early recommendations that just didn't meet the security issue litmus test was, offering a district, cell phone to carry to at a given event, and then we would have a carryable record for it. But it didn't solve the problem of the portability then of the number. So
right, and we can't assume that the students would have that capability as well. So
correct.
And the third one that would also kind of nix that solution was that we would require that it anonymizes both the employee and the student phone number, so neither would have the other's direct line for communication. And then the last one, which again, anything I discuss with one exception will pretty much cover it, would be the goal is to allow massive texting, so that the band director or football coach or other advisor, teacher, coach could broadcast out to a large group. I jotted down like between 10 and 100, depending on the size of the organization or the group.
Yeah, I don't think we have any organizations that exceed that many.
Right. I think football and band are probably the two
largest.
At least that I could come up with. So those are kind of the 4 areas that I use to review some of the suggestions that have come up. So I'll just kind of review then the options that I looked at. There are obviously district devices, Dr. Otto mentioned. Google Talk was mentioned at one point. Connect Ed was also mentioned. And then there were 3 very similar products that are basically mass texting products that I got from Mr. Seminara to look at. And those functionally, technically, are pretty much the same solution with some caveats as to what makes one better than the other. But just going back to my first requirement, the communication to be accessible to either myself or somebody in the district pretty much eliminates district devices, Google Talk, and all 3 of those texting solutions, because there's really no archive or place that we could go to, say, pull all the communication between 2 parties last week or last month. Nothing appeared on their feature list at all for any of those products.
Let me ask you one question, though. With the group texting, could that not be set up if you're a CC on those?
We could potentially find, that was one option I considered, we could potentially find a way to manage the lists, but I don't know that that would be foolproof. I think once you open those features up, I don't know that we have full control really to maintain those unless we left a really tight grip on those lists and the management of it. And I don't know how we could do that with so many people involved, coaches, advisors, students.
If you're providing this anonymous sort of firewall, right, it has to. That communication has to pass through some sort of conduit, right? And
yeah, that's what those services offer.
Right, and at that point of contact, if we have a contract with those services that says that we have to be copied on all communication going back and forth, would that not eliminate that issue?
If it's possible.
Yeah.
Again, I even reviewed further this afternoon before this meeting, seeing if there were any features or any reporting capabilities. None of them suggested that exists. One of them for certain is a self-managed, meaning each individual person would sign up for it.
I see.
The other 2 don't seem to indicate they have those features. I mean, again, if as we go through it, if we decide we want to look further, I can certainly do that. But at the outset, it doesn't appear that they have those capabilities. We would have to come up with some kind of a workaround to make sure that a certain number of someone's, and I don't even know where that would be, is included on every list, that's maintained.
Yeah.
So there's something to consider there. But again, the district devices and Google Talk, neither of them have that solution. Additionally, the district devices doesn't anonymize the student's number. So as an employee, I can text out to my 10 students, and now I have all their numbers at my fingertips. So I think that also eliminates that one. Google Talk is limited to 5 people as a free service. So that's really not usable beyond some very small selective groups. Connect Ed, that one has two of those items I mentioned that kind of eliminates it. One, it also doesn't really anonymize. If I'm a user of that system, I have the capability to log into it and see the people that I'm managing or sending messages to. If we would want them to only use it from a cell phone, again, we could kind of investigate whether we could lock that down. It doesn't appear that we can, other than not showing them where to go. But additionally, then it would just be a voice, and it would be one-way communication from the employee to the students. So again, I think between those 2, kind of eliminates that, except in some very select cases. So again, that then leaves the different texting solutions, and there were 3 of them that I looked at. One of them that is a free service is the one that would essentially be self-managed. We would be completely cut out of it. Additionally, that one offers up, because it's free, they include advertisements and other things on the text messages. We can't really guarantee the content, similar to other advertising discussions we've had. Not saying that it would be inappropriate, but it'd be outside of our control. The whole thing would be outside of our control. In reality, a coach could probably go do that tomorrow. They wouldn't be in violation of the policy, but there's a lot of other stuff going on there. I don't know that that's really a solution. The other 2 are both paid services. One that I favored more than the other. That one is obviously then a pay-for-service. We'd have to investigate further on the exact costs, but I would say it's a few $100s a month minimally. It could be significantly more than that, depending on the volume of calls, the number of people we put in place. And again, still don't think it has that archive feature, but we could kind of dive deeper if that's something you want to continue to pursue. If you want, I can give you a little more explanation of how those work. I learned more than I wanted to know probably on how they work, but essentially there's just an intermediary party. Everybody is texting that intermediary, and it's then forwarding out based on a keyword or a group of keywords.
Right.
It's a short code, so that's how it works.
One of the things that we had brought up as we were brainstorming, and I don't know if this got back to you, Mr. Huss, or not, but we had mentioned, why not call the vendors and ask them,
The carriers?
the carriers, the AT&Ts and the Verizons, and tell them what our problem is and see if they have a solution that they can fit into us.
I didn't call all the carriers. We currently only deal with one ourselves. I did ask my Sprint rep about that. He wasn't aware of anything that they offer. And I think, again, that kind of goes back
I think
to
I
the
actually had
uniqueness.
mentioned that to him after
Okay.
the last
Yeah, that
meeting.
came up somewhere along the way, and I had other discussions with him, and I mentioned it. So, again, we didn't go through their whole technical channel, but he wasn't aware of any kind of solutions or really any other needs for those solutions that he's come across. And he's a public sector salesperson, so
What a great business opportunity that is.
it is, yeah.
But anyway, where that leaves us is really
Well, let me just-
Okay, can you back up for a second and
Sure.
tell us what is, you said the policy is in effect today. What is it that we're saying is in effect today? That there is absolutely
There is no texting between students and employees. That's the way the policy reads right now.
Okay, and then how about
No Facebook.
Calling
those
each other on the
other
phone.
things. No, I mean, I don't
all
have
that.
the text of the policy here in front of me, but do you have it there, Andrew?
Yeah, it just says,
I know what the policy says, but I
No
mean, that's the
emailing with personal
expectation
email.
Absolutely.
that everyone is aware of. They're aware that that is what it is.
yeah, no phone contact with students, no texting with students, no communication on social media with students, and no emailing with personal email.
And
in response-
is your assumption that, or is your gut feel that many people are in violation of that policy, or do you think they're
Actually, I asked that question because we had our admin council meeting. It just so happened it was the same day as today, but I had been monitoring it anyway. And Goose, our athletic director, Mrs. Goss, I said, "We're going to be talking about this tonight. What can I tell the committee? Because we've just started a whole new season of sports. How are they dealing with it?" She didn't tell me how, but she said they're dealing with it. They don't like it, but they're finding ways to get the communication done. That's as much detail. I mean, Bill, you were in the meeting. That's what she said. I didn't really push for more details. All I wanted to know is if it wasn't being complied with. So if there are random, minimal infractions, there may be. They're just not getting up to my level.
I think there are. I had heard over the break where a text had to go out about a cancellation or a rescheduling of some sort of game, and the student got the text. So,
And living in the practical world, I think until we do really put something in place, that's probably going to happen. Again, we're not attempting to be the texting police because we just don't have the staff to monitor that. It's kind of like, at this point, I hate to say it, but it's really kind of like an honor system. You're told not to do it. You're expected not to do it. If it's reported that it's happening, then that puts us in a quandary of how we're going to deal with it.
And we also did create the email accounts for all of the coaches, new and prior, anybody that's been brought on. I got lists from Goose on that. They've all been given their email accounts. I know they are using that. Obviously, that only.
I mean, the only way I would
have to
know
notice.
if there are violations would be to survey the kids to say, have you gotten a text you shouldn't have
well,
gotten?
and I think to the degree, and I don't know what the discussion has been at that level, but I mean, clearly, if a coach or somebody else has the ability to make a change, they can push that information out on Facebook through the Daniel Boone website.
Mhm.
And if you like Facebook, you're going to get that notification. If you like the Daniel Boone page,
Mhm.
you'll get that notification that, whatever it is was rescheduled or canceled or whatever. You'll get
Right.
that notification via email or via smartphone if you have a smartphone.
I don't know if Facebook even offers a possible solution to all of this. I don't think they're that.
No, but I'm just saying
immediate.
though, I think
For the kids
coaches,
that have smartphones,
there's
I
not
think
going to
they
be a
have ways to do
one, there may, for the time being, until we work through this, there may not be a one-size-fits-all strategy. A coach may have to say, okay, I'm going to have to, A, put something on the website, if possible. I don't know how quickly that information gets posted.
Mhm.
But B, somehow get the information onto the Facebook page, that, push that information out to the students. Or C, get a Connect Ed or something else. I mean, there's a variety, send a group email out to all the kids on their email accounts, or copy parents. We haven't prohibited parents from being in a loop on
That's
these types
correct.
of things. So parents can certainly get a phone call. parents can certainly get an email and be able to tell their kids, hey, look, this is something that's changed here. So I think our goal was to prevent this dissemination of personal contact information of the students and of the teachers amongst each other. And to that degree, that there are ways I think we can do a workaround until we find a better solution to this.
Since this policy is in effect, and I hesitate saying this because I'm of the opinion that we need to find a way, because I think you can't deny the technology.
Absolutely.
And people are going to circumvent the policy and use it. It's just the reality. So I think it's worth some time, not
absolutely.
to take up all of our time, but it's worth some time to try to figure out a way to make it work for everybody, make them comfortable.
Absolutely.
However, if the policy is in place, I know you've told your staff, but somehow you need to tell the students and the parents that this is the policy. You are not to be giving out your personal cell phone information, kids, to the staff. I mean, if that's the policy, you got to tell them.
Yeah. Well,
it's just that I know the teachers know, but the parents and the kids need to be told too.
Step two here also is, I think we need to get in touch with one of these texting companies, talk to a representative there, and really drill down into what their services are. I mean, they have what they advertise that we can get on the web and read about. I mean, obviously read the information that we had discussed, but until you pick up the phone and actually understand what their true capabilities are, I mean, they make those custom platforms for all kinds of different things. So I think that's probably the next logical step.
Okay. If it's a that's fine. I just didn't want to. I mean, for 6 of them, I figured we'd agree that most of them are eliminated and then have a little bit more general direction. So I can follow up.
At the end of the day, following your reasoning, Frank, that if there's not a technology solution, then we may have to come back to the drawing board and relook at the policy. And that's always an option that the board has. But again, that's something that all 9 of you then have to weigh in on and decide, would we want to put some kind of waiver in, as we talked about before, for texting and things like that, and understand that while we can't preclude numbers getting out, that we're going to try to monitor it the best we can. So I don't know if we're at that point yet or not, but I think the intent of this policy is very good, and it's something that I would like to see remain in place until we really have totally exhausted any possible, because I agree with you, the technology is great and safety is important, but it's a very complex issue, and I think one that requires, is obviously, I'm begging the question, it's requiring a complex response. So if this had been easy, we'd be done with this and on to the 200 series now. So we're just not there yet, and I think in terms of when we hear of these minor violations that are happening, I think as long as they're innocent and not intentional, we'll just say, you know what, you really have to, it's kind of like, don't do that. I mean, there's not going to be any disciplinary sanctions unless, of course, we hear of some major, infraction that leads to some inappropriate behavior. But somebody accidentally texting or saying, look, I had no other way to do it for now, we'll say, look, you're not supposed to be doing that. We'll try to help you. And I think we're all trying to do that helping phase now. So we're still not there yet.
Any other comments on this policy?
I think Amy wanted to say something. I thought I saw your hand up.
Amy?
No, you were just talking about being able to contact students through parents, and I think the issue that's raising alarms with most of the teachers is when they're away with the students is when they most dramatically want this, and of course you can't go through parents at that time. Most of them aren't there, which is why the teachers were concerned about this policy to begin with.
Correct. That's where I was hoping Connect Ed would come in, but unfortunately that tool doesn't allow you to make those contacts, or at least make the contacts one way without you having access to all that information.
Can you remind me what the initially when you first proposed, Dr. Otto, you mentioned a parent waiver. Why did that get?
Because it didn't. In the eyes of the committee, the total committee, I don't even remember who it was. It didn't resolve the issue of the portability of the number. Even though you could sign a waiver, the number would still be out there.
I sort of remember that discussion, and it got complicated because let's say the scenario was you had 20 students, and 7 of them had waivers and the other ones didn't, and you had to keep track of it. It's an all or nothing thing, you know, in our opinion. In my opinion, it gets too complicated. Who can I call? Who am I allowed to call? Who am I not allowed to call? And
Yeah, I wouldn't want to have to.
At the end of the day, I'm still not comfortable with the idea that, okay, you got a waiver, now we're somehow facilitating this exchange of personal contact information, and, you know, where does it stop? Are you only going to get waivers from parents of seniors, or is it parents of seniors and juniors? Can a parent of a 10-year-old give you a waiver? And now you got teachers communicating with a 10 or 9-year-old?
If I'm walking on the streets of Philadelphia with students on a field trip, and the purpose of having that number is I can contact them or they can contact me in the event of an emergency, then yeah, I'd like that waiver. I mean, we're talking about safety of students, and that should be the paramount thing. And if there's technology available to that end, we need to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I hear that, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I think that I'm uncomfortable with anything that's going to facilitate that personal contact, because it can be abused by.
And as a teacher, I would want it also to be monitored.
Sure.
You know, I would like any text that I would send or any kind of communication. You want that monitored, because you don't want anybody to ever come and say, she sent me this.
accuse you, right?
Yeah, I would like a permanent archived record of what's sent back and forth.
And it is, and the intention of the policy has been that two-way protection, not just for the protection of the student, so that, just as you're mentioning, no one's falsely accused. I mean, it doesn't say that in the policy, but that's an implied outgrowth of this policy, that everybody's protected.
Look, in the interim, maybe we need more chaperones at away events and things of that nature to facilitate communication and organization and that sort of thing. I mean, you know, we talked about this before, but I mean, before cell phones and texting was even available, we managed to have the same kind of field trips. It was, I realize we live in a different age now where people can respond and communicate a lot quicker, but somehow we managed to get it done before. So, all right, well, I would suggest you call some of these folks and get some more information on cost and workarounds and exactly what their capabilities are.
Yeah, I'll contact the club texting was the one that seemed to have the most capabilities.
And those are just a few that we managed to dig up, and I didn't spend a whole lot of time on this. I'm sure there's quite a few companies that do that, and I got to believe there's probably companies out there like, I don't know, like these telecommunication companies, whether it's Verizon or it's AT&T or it's I don't know, SAS or IBM or others that may have, you know, some more sophisticated.
I think the technology is common in terms of using these short codes for blasting out, because it is a huge marketing tool and business kind of drives that innovation. The question will be about really around the archiving. I think there are plenty of players. I just don't know what their other capabilities.
Even if they can't archive, but somehow we can be in the loop of, you know what I'm saying?
Right, as long as there's some
we're
record.
in that contact list, so that you see the information's going back and forth. Then we can archive that on our own. You know what I mean? Like,
right, it needs to be stored or emailed or somewhere that we have access to it. So, yeah, I'll follow up with them again. Of the ones that you provided and others that I looked at, that seems to be the most. Feature.
It might even be like a virtual PBX company could help us.
I mean, these companies.
Those are everywhere now. I mean,
Yeah.
I just signed up for a virtual PBX company.
What's that mean?
A PBX is a phone system.
Right.
And instead of buying a big, large phone system, you know, like we used to in the past, you can actually buy that service online.
Yeah.
And it's just a virtual system that is managed, and you just pay the service. But it gives you phone number
It's a communication
extensions.
tool.
It gives you all kinds of features that you would have on a normal phone system.
Oh.
So maybe there's something there. I don't know about the texting part. That always seems to be a
Well,
thorn on our side.
I
Figure
guess-
that part out.
These communication companies are storing this data. I mean, because when you
For
have
some
a
length of
police
time,
case,
yeah.
when you have a case, they go to the phone companies and they say, turn over the text messages. And they have them. I mean, it's not like they're not.
Police can always access those records too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that they access
Well, I will
these
say
things
this,
all the
though.
time.
To that comment, it's not as easy to
Yeah,
get
why?
cell phone records as one would think.
It's
So
not,
we should
but
have
with
a
a court
warrant.
order you can.
Yeah.
But even then, it takes time.
It takes time.
It does
Absolutely.
take a tremendous amount of
To the
time.
degree, but the technology is there.
Yes.
The issue is, the privacy issues and all that kind of stuff. And so the degree that we're in the loop and we're as part of that communication is going back and forth, then we have our own capability of having, a record of those types of things.
Oh, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say in terms of the policy, I'm not hearing any feedback that the email part or the Facebook and social media part or the phone issue, because I think most people were already being diligent with that, and that's not Facebooking or social media with someone's never going to be a safety issue. You can't say, well, hey, wait a minute, I got a safety issue with Facebooking or with having to send an email, because it's not immediate. So it's the texting clause here that is really for good reason, because texting has become a very effective means of communication. Frankly, it just has
Well, look, and this may be a
has-
short-term. This may be a short-term issue too. I mean, to the degree that it takes us some time to figure this out, the hardware may catch up to us. I mean, the limitation is not everybody has a smartphone, right? In terms of using the email,
Right.
but the ubiquity of smartphones is becoming more and more prevalent as you go along. So.
I mean, there's educational research that touts the use of cell phones as a very, very good educational tool. So this has really been a mixed bag argument even for me in terms of this. But unfortunately, just like anything that is good that can be used in a bad way is still bad. So in some respects, so there's still an underbelly to this that has to be watched, and we unfortunately experienced some of that firsthand. So. And our neighbors in the county also experienced it. So I think we need to remain vigilant, but yet, cooperative to the degree that we can to try to find a solution. I mean, I don't know how else to put it.
No, I think we're doing the right thing. We've got the policy in place, and you're taking a practical approach to people adhering to it. And in the meantime, we're trying to find a solution that everyone's comfortable with, which seems like it may take a while. Any other comments before I move on to another policy? Thank you for all that research you did. I know you came specifically to talk about that. If you need to cut out, feel free
I appreciate
to do that.
That has nothing to do with my story. Who's more likely to contact an adult teacher contacting a student, or a student? That's nothing to do with the story. Or a student contacting a teacher. What do you think?
Too hypothetical for me to even
Right.
respond.
Any guesses?
In a legitimate fashion, or you mean when it's
I
abused?
mean, okay, the girl with crushes and, a 22-year-old teacher. And
So when it's abused, you mean?
Yeah,
I don't know.
You just guess. Is the teacher more likely to see this?
I couldn't even speculate.
No idea.
I couldn't even speculate on that. I would say
Run a survey.
prior to putting any policy in place, I would think that you would get issues, and I don't say issues, you might have teachers who are very creative with technology that would want to set up some kind of, hey, when you're home tonight, text me and let me know when you look outside, is there dew on the window because of the change in the weather or something. You know what I mean? And that would be, to me, that's kind of really cool that you could do that. But then it turns into, well, what are you doing tomorrow night? And then next thing you know, it becomes social and it's not educational anymore. And because you can't control it, you have no way of knowing where it's going to spiral.
Yeah. Great.
There have been teachers who have wanted to use Facebook as homework help, that kind of, to use it as an educational end. And I think that might be ways that teachers initiate it. I don't know of any other.
And that's probably true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've heard of several projects that involved Facebook. For history classes, students were picking out
Excellent
historical
educational
figures and
tool.
creating
It just becomes
pages for
Classroom
them.
blogs,
Yep.
sharing what
Yeah.
their thoughts on a book. And
I mean, this whole technology thing is
it's a great way to capture
for kids who love to write.
That's their
This
world.
technology world is fantastic. I mean, you doing blogs and writing and creative exposés and things like that. But
Aren't you more afraid of a teacher getting involved with a student, like happens every once in a while? Isn't that really what you're trying to?
Or
exactly.
any
Teacher.
type of behavior wherever it happens to be initiated. Yeah, that's the purpose of the policy.
All right, sure.
well, and as we said earlier, it's a two-way protection. We don't. Obviously, there are students who could set somebody up and falsely accuse someone. I mean, there's all kinds of
there's students that can harass a teacher. too,
Right, and
so
exactly.
that happens.
Parents could get that number from their kid and start harassing a teacher. So there's a lot of issues of protection on both sides of this issue that need to be monitored.
All right, well, if we're finished with that, we'll move on to the review of the
All
other
right,
policies.
what we
starting
have
with
here
127.
for you, yeah, I'll turn it over to Bill in just a minute because Bill did most of the research. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot in these policies that needs to be done. So it really is the culmination of the 100 series, although each of them does bring up some important issues, so we'll probably have to talk a little bit about each one. The other thing that we're doing before we enter into this conversation, one of the things, as you know, that we started to include these AGs, the administrative guidelines. We're going to need to double back in the 100s because I think moving forward, now that we're getting into this process, rather than having to double back once we get into the 200 series, every time we see a policy, we're going to bring the AG with it. So we're moving forward and not having to go backwards. So we're going to take a little bit of time. I think we researched it. There are still about 10 or 15 AGs still from the 100 series.
Yeah, that's accurate.
That need to be
10 or
looked at, so they're going to come back. And I think we can start to go forward with the 200s as our next step. But I would like to, at some point, I said this process could take a couple years. At least if we look back, I think the 100s and the zeros took about a year. So if we're looking at extrapolating that, the 200s has a lot of policies in it. I mean, a lot, and things that are going to need to really
But don't
be
the
discussed.
200s and the 300s start to replicate themselves?
No, that's 3, 4, and 5s.
So 3, 4,
When you
5.
get the 3s, the 3, 4s, and 5s are at personnel policies. So they tend to cross, we might be able to go through them more quickly. The 200 series is, I think it's labeled programs, and that's huge. So there's a lot in there that will need to be looked at.
And I don't know whether this makes it easy or not, but when we first did this, we first proposed a policy committee, I think right before the first meeting, I just sat down and read all of the 100s in one sitting and just wrote notes down and crossed things out or circled things or whatever. I just highlighted them, and that's still what I'm still working off of here today. I haven't, so in over a year, I didn't go back and read through the 200s. You know what I mean? So I don't know, maybe there's a shortcut to this, as everybody says, look, we're going to start the 200s beginning, the March policy committee meeting. So everybody read the 200s, make your comments, and get them to us before we even get started.
There are
I mean, maybe that's an
a couple
easier way to
I
trump it.
think
That way you
that's probably
guys
a good
get
idea.
all our input before you even start crafting the new policy, and then you come to us with a revised version, and we can look at it and say, oh yeah, okay, you put that
But
in
let me
there.
say this, or having said what you just said, you just put a bear of an assignment on yourself. Reading those 200s policies is easy, because you have a full-time job.
Well, we have to go through them anyway. So
I gotta read
No, no,
them. Yeah, I mean,
But my
So-
point is, it's a lot of work.
if we can't do it in all once, if
It won't happen.
one of
in
us can't do it in
sitting.
one sitting, then at least we keep staying ahead of our meetings.
Right.
So as you bring them up, you're going to go in order. So as long
I
as
mean, I think
we can
the
read
issue I always
ahead
run
of
into is one of, I read the policy I have here, and I make edits to it, and then, 2 or 3 days before we have our meeting or whatever, I get the policies that are emailed to me that you guys have edited, and then I got to read your policy again, and then read mine, and make sure I've got my, maybe they took care of my edit, maybe they didn't,
Right.
and then did they, okay, well here's the section I need to add that, or if you completely flipped it around, I'm like, I don't even know what to look at anymore because the policy's changed so dramatically. I don't know whether it's easier if one of you is just getting 3 or 4 comments on the policy and say, okay, well, I see what the concern here is, and yeah, you know what, it's irrelevant because we're going to scrap the whole policy anyways, or, all right, we can incorporate that when we do our revision, and then it's just done.
Would
This
it be
is what I-
possible? Would it be possible for us to come up with a schedule? And if it's not, I understand. But would it be possible so we can say, listen, at this policy meeting in March, we're going to be reviewing from here to here.
Yeah, I mean, you can put whatever schedule
give
you
us
want
your
together.
comments before that meeting for those policies. So if we can't read all the 200s, we can at least read all of those prior to the meeting. Because like Andrew said, right now we don't have enough time. It's like we only have a week or less than a week to say, oh, this is what we're going to be reviewing on Wednesday night. Let me get caught up. But if we had a schedule pushed out for the next, for the rest of 2013 of our policy review meetings, we could say in advance, oh, okay, we know that we're going to go over these 5 policies in March. let me give you my let me read those 5 policies and give you my comments.
That's good from an outside of this meeting standpoint. But as you have seen, we could take an hour and a half sometimes on one policy.
No, I understand that.
And that
Yeah.
will,
So you
I
can't
mean, you
schedule
can
it.
do the outside research. I can say to you and give you an assignment and say, look, by March 1, you better have read, just like a teacher, you better have read 200 to 280 policies. But then when we get into class, suddenly the student back there and the student, i.e. you guys in the committee, begin to have questions. And what looks like an agenda for 15 policies turns into an agenda and we only covered 3.
No, but I guess what my point was, and that may happen, I guess what I'm thinking.
Well, that's what has happened so far.
Well, absolutely.
And
I
it
guess what I'm
should,
trying to do
because
is,
if you have to discuss it, you have to discuss it.
with the 100 series, as we went through this, I went through and I read it and I made my edits, right? And I was prepared to come to talk to them. And then what happened was you guys administratively will go through them ahead of time. Some of them got rid of altogether. So it's kind of like,
Well, they were old and
yeah,
deleted, right.
and that's fine.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that. So that's fine. Turn the page there. And then we take your version and then you're incorporating, after you've spent all this time editing it, now you're taking comments from all of us and editing it again. And then we get the revised version back again, and then we're going to look at it one more time. I'm just thinking, is there a way to preempt all that? You get our comments ahead of time and can incorporate it in the first edit.
Yeah, let me say it this way. For some policies, that will be good because they're based on minimal regulation. They're just local policy. But there are many policies in here that are either based on FERPA or on federal law or on state, that we have to do. We don't expect you to do that legal research.
No,
for us.
I'm not doing the legal research. I don't think any of our comments to date have been, are you sure this is section
Right.
533
No,
of the
I
code,
understand.
Dr. Otto?
Right.
I have no idea.
Right.
What we've done is, okay, well, how does one notify parents ahead of time? Like those are some of my questions on here, and something like that. Or what's the process? If there's some sort of like, we're going to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Okay, well, what's the process then for doing X, Y, and Z? And so those might just be my comments. I may have 1, I may have 16 on a thing. Monica may have 3 or 4. Who knows? But you're going to get all those comments ahead of time. So you've already anticipated the questions we've gotten. You've already done the work. You've changed the policy. You've put in new paragraphs or taken old ones out as the law may
Correct.
dictate. And then you send it back to us and say, I took all your comments. Here's a revised policy. We get that 4 days before the meeting. And you say, please review it so when we get to the meeting we can discuss it. If I've got additional questions at the time, we can have those additional questions. If I've got no questions, because you've answered all of mine, we're done. It's just rubber stamping these policies.
Well,
and we can,
what I would suggest then is maybe we don't need to, because I would say if we're going to do a full review of the 200 series, because I'm trying to just brainstorm here what you're saying. If we were to take the whole 200 series, which is about what? How many policies are there?
I don't have that.
You have the 200s. I mean, do you have the index?
yeah, I mean,
You have the-
let me see if I have the index. I've got something.
I mean, if we can quantify it and say
I do have the index.
how many actual, give or take, 25, 30?
37.
37 policies. So we would have to read and review 37 policies and any connected administrative guidelines, which for some of those 200s, I know there are probably some extensive administrative guidelines.
And when do you think we'll be starting the 200 series?
Well, we can start it for next month. But my point is, if you only want to, we can bring as many forward or as few forward based on what has to be done to them. Like, they're not all going to be like this. Tonight's probably the easiest group that we've looked at so far because they've just been done recently.
Is it too much to ask that we try to review the 37 200s before next month and give
I got no problem.
Dr. Otto, Mr. McMoyle our comments? Is that reasonable?
What, next month, like beginning of March?
Before the next
Beginning of
policy review.
February. We have a policy committee meeting the second Wednesday of February.
I honestly think you're biting off a little more than you can chew.
Okay.
That's a lot of stuff.
How about a third?
I mean, I don't know, Bill. You
It's
can
not
weigh
that
in
much
here.
stuff, though. I mean, I look at it. We had
If you don't think it's, I mean,
35 policies through the zeros and 100s. I mean, I think I sat down one day and just spent 45 minutes reading the policies. And, I'm not getting into the who's and the wherefores and the what's that's. If I see an edit that I need to make because of typing, that's one thing. But I may have a question or I may have a thought about change this or change that wording. I mean, until you guys, I think you get that stuff first and get that first edit out because someone's retyping all this stuff anyways, right?
Well, could we try doing a third of the 37 and then timeline-wise, I think we would need it 2 weeks. Let's say you got it to us 2 weeks prior to the next meeting. Then we're sitting down and we're looking at any legal changes and making changes and then sending them back to you. That's what you suggested.
I guess what I would say is, I get it, you guys need time to take our edits and then incorporate them into what you're doing for the policy.
Or see if your edits are even legal and
Yeah, right. Well,
doable.
look, what my suggestion might be then is, and this is just the way I work personally, so it's not necessarily the right way, but after a meeting, I usually take my notes or my punch list or whatever it is I've got, and I start working on it right away. Okay, I don't like to wait until right before a meeting. I like to get it done right after the meeting while it's fresh in my mind and I'm working on it. Okay, so after this meeting, sometime over the weekend or
That's how we do the edits. As soon as the next day, we'll start editing.
Over the next couple of days, I would probably sit down and read the 200s. But for me, it's a matter of, I can't spend 5 minutes on Daniel Boone things and go to something else. I usually set aside some time to focus on Daniel Boone stuff. And if you see my emails, it's usually very late at night, and I spend hours, kind of trying to get that stuff out of the way so I can go on with the rest of my life. But I would spend the time to read it, and I would edit it, and I would send it to you guys, and then just wait for you guys to get back to me a week or 2 weeks before the next policy committee meeting. So that's 4 weeks from now.
So
I would think in the next 10 days you would get my review of 201 through 215, and there may be something I have no comment on. I mean, some of these things are going to be like, okay, well, whatever. I mean, some of these things we're reviewing tonight, I kind of looked at it and said,
Well, before you go on to that 200s
There's not much
assignment,
tonight to change.
we probably have to go back and finish the AGs for
Yeah,
one
that's
or two.
fine.
That
That's
would
fine.
probably be the first
That's fine for you.
But I
to do
think
that.
you're talking more process here, and we're trying to agree
Yeah.
on maybe a...
I'm just trying to think of a
Why don't we
faster way
say-
to get through this.
Why don't we say, listen, let's go through the 200s as best we all can. You don't have to try to get through them all, but if you can, that's great. If you can't, just make an effort to go through whatever you can, and whatever comments you have, get them back to Dr. Otto by February 1st.
And I would
And then our
say
meeting
to
is
you,
February 13th.
any policy
right?
that is less than 10 years old is probably going to be an easy read, because they've probably been, and if it's 2008 since I've been here or less, you can probably just flip right through it. It's probably not going to change. Because if it needed change already, we would have been bringing it back to you through another vehicle.
Right.
It's those 1999 and prior policies that have actually slowed down the process too, because they're so far out of whack that you don't have an easy read with
Okay.
everything.
We'll go through that, and we'll try to change the way we do this. So moving forward, we continue to get ahead of our of this a little bit and provide you the comments
That's fine.
firsthand. So if you can, in the future, if you know of any policies that are going to go away, let us know before we take the time of reading them and making comments to them.
Well, actually,
Gosh.
I'll go through the 200s, and then by the end of the week and tell you, don't even bother, we're going to delete it.
Okay, great.
Because there
That'd
are
be
probably
great.
some deletables in there. I mean, I was already looking at it. There's some deletables in there. There's no sense even reviewing them. They're
Okay.
gone.
Frank, I'd like, if you're going to say, just read as far as you can, say I don't read as far as you guys do, you read all 37, and I have comments on number 28, but he already did 28. If you tell me how many you think you're going to get through, then
I think,
can
like Ms.
pace it
McElmoyle
that
said,
way.
if you get a third of the way through, you're probably safe. I doubt it at the February 13th meeting we're going to go that far.
Yeah, and
So I think you're safe if you can at least get a third of the way through.
and nothing's saying that we can't still comment during the meeting on these things. I'm just trying to think of a way to, because we get to the meetings, and I'm looking right now. I obviously went farther than I thought. I got something on 209 student accidents insurance, and I've highlighted a couple things, and I say why specify. So like these types of comments, we have to wait till we actually have the meeting, and then I'm giving them to you, and then you're like, oh, okay, now we got to incorporate and bring it back to you. My God, I'd rather have you have them while you're doing the work, and you say, okay, what did Monica have to say about 209? What did Frank have to say? What did Connor? What did Andrew? Okay,
Save a month.
yeah, and
Save
then
a month of work.
let's incorporate those comments in this thing, or maybe they're not valid because they're going to go away anyways, or whatever it is, and we'll make the edits, and here's the revised policy. We just get it back. We just get it back. Okay, look, we revised the policy. Read this before the meeting. If you have additional comments or questions, great. If you don't, then we're just sitting here rubber stamping these things, and our time here is a little bit more productive, I think. There's going to be a couple policies here and there where we're going to spend an hour or more probably talking about it because it's going to involve the public or it's going to be something controversial, but
Well, that's the nature of policy.
more of the routine stuff, we can get that in and out.
Well, no, there's like I said, there are some deletables Sometimes there are situations where we've actually added policies because of this review, like that records management thing that wasn't in place. I mean, that was totally out of sequence, so we took some time there. So we have actually, when you look at the progress, even though we're only on the 100s, we have actually been in the other hundreds for some individual policies that have had to come forward as a result of some serious gaps in our policies as well. So,
Okay.
That's some new laws, the cardiac arrest.
right, like
Right,
cardiac
right,
arrest, all
right.
that kind of stuff that comes up that you might as well throw it into this committee. This is about
Absolutely.
policy.
Absolutely.
So February 1st, if we can agree to that. And are there any AGs that we need to review before then?
Well, any AGs that are connected to, well, all of the rest of the 100s. And we can set, you know what we'll do is we'll collate what we've done, because we have a running record. And we'll let you know what we've done, and then we'll point the way as to this is the needs to be done. That's easy.
Okay, great.
We know what we haven't done. And obviously we've kept the record. If you look at the website on where we have policies, you'll see on the right, you'll see the date. It was, so any of those that
Yeah,
have
the
new
review date.
recent dates, that's what this committee's been doing.
Right.
And that's probably the best way for the public to track what we've been doing. If you look out there on that website, it'll show you, because I think we found a couple that were not done that way as well, or technology hadn't posted it yet. But one of the, and again, being new to this process in this fashion, I just started to think that we're putting new policies in place and some of the administrative guidelines don't match, and that just causes, that could actually cause legal issues for us, where you have one thing that says this, and then you have something over here that says either exactly the opposite or something completely different. So we don't want that inconsistency, so we need to clean up. So the immediate assignment would be the 100 AGs, and then starting, as you said, with at least the first third of the 200s.
Yeah, the 100 AGs, I have the new index that was updated, and from 100 to 117, those AGs have not been done. And then we started doing them starting with 118, it looks like.
Okay, so our homework assignment would be to review 100 through 117 in the AGs, and 200 to what, 215?
Yeah, something like, or 210. There's 37
Yeah, I was
of
just
them.
looking at the 200s today. For example, I think the attendance policy is dated 1999.
1990,
1990.
December 17th.
So that's probably going to have some major revision.
Yeah, guardian requirements, that's...
Yeah,
well,
some
that
of
was
them, to be
reviewed. No,
quite
that was
honest with you, attendance regulations have not changed that much. But they're not the same as they were in 1990. That I can assure you. Because I did a new attendance policy in another district between 1990 and now. So I know there's that's why I'm saying some of these policies that this policy book has only been added to, it's never been reviewed and edited. I mean, we have kept current with changes, but we didn't go back and do what you're supposed to do, reviewing. I think you need to go through an every 5-year. It's like even federal laws go through a 5-year reauthorization period. So
The ones that don't have any date adopted next to them, is that an indication that they're very old? Or that doesn't mean much of anything?
I would have to, on the website it says that.
Yeah, some of them are blank.
Yeah, that would be cause for concern for me to understand why that's like that.
I think it's probably like that because it was probably even before.
Because they're old, you think?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, like this one, 202, date adopted, nothing. Last revised 1992. So I got to believe the date was adopted was sometime in the 80s or even 1970s probably.
This policy book's not sharp. It's getting sharper. The 0 and the 100s are now pretty good. The 200s are good, but they've got too many flaws. That's and again, I don't want to keep repeating myself. That's why I suggested that the board, and the administration.
Do you guys
undertake
do this on a Word document?
I don't, Laura, as far as typing it up?
Yeah. She
What's
doing it on
Laura
Word?
do that?
Mhm. Yeah, there's a template.
Sandy's taking that over. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, because quite frankly, here's the other thing is, if they've already typed these things, or what, I don't know whether you guys are editing these things first and then giving them the type up, or they're typing them up on their own and then editing them afterwards.
No, we bring them here for review, and then we would go back with the changes.
So then they type the whole thing up the first time.
This is like the churn here.
Right.
We do the churning here, and then we give them to the board for your first and second reading. This is the churn committee. This is where all
Okay, no, I guess what I was just asking was because if it was, I didn't know if they were already clicking away and retyping
Yeah.
these things. If they were, I was going to say email them to me, because then, Word documents allow you to track changes. So I could make comments, email the document to Frank and Connor, and they would see my comments, strikeouts, and adding, and I could put a comment in the side, would say, I don't understand, what is this doing, or I think we need to change this because X, Y, and Z. And you would see those types of comments on there. We'd all be sharing that document and then sending it to, it was just another way of doing it.
My
But
guess is they're probably just
no
using
worries,
Adobe.
we'll make the comments in a PDF and email it to you. That's
Yep.
not a problem.
Don't forget also with the 200s, if we could try to go from 201 to 210, there's an administrative guideline for just about every one of them.
Oh, that's
Except-
right. I didn't
except
think about
one.
that.
Well, that's this.
So-
This 200 is a heavy series. There's a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah. So to do the best you can. That's all. I mean, you don't have to really.
No,
If it doesn't fit your schedule.
I have to read, then I can gear up for
No, that
that.
makes
If we could try to make
Believe
it.
me,
I mean, that
can't
makes sense for
spend
everybody.
45 on that.
All right, so are we clear on that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, look, I don't want to push my way of working on things on everybody
No,
else.
as long
It
as I
just-
have my goal, I can put it, I need to get so many done in so much time, I'm okay.
Well, I mean, I think what we're trying to do is streamline our process, but I just want to make it clear to everybody, the reality is that we need to take the time that it takes, because if there's important issues, that every policy could potentially be a new issue, because none of them are related.
Yeah.
201 is
Yeah.
not 202.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, look, this is just more about process. I was trying to figure
Yeah.
out a way.
No,
to
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt for us to, if you feel ambitious and you want to read every single policy and get it to Dr. Otto, go ahead.
well, no, I mean, between...
You'll just put it in your bucket until.
Yeah, between Bill and...
Rises up to the top of the
and-
pile.
Well, we have about 3 or 4 people that work pretty heavily on this. Two secretaries in the office and Bill and me administratively, so we'll
Okay.
get there.
So this evening we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 policies still remaining. 127, 28, 130,
And 2
131,
AGs.
and a few AGs with that. So,
And
wanna step us through?
looking at these 4 policies, comparing them to other districts and checking if there were any legal changes that we needed to update, we didn't see anything. So we don't have a lot of changes, or really any that we can see.
I had one question on 127 where it said, the first paragraph, when it's talking about charter schools, and it says, in accordance with the requirements of Act 22 of 1997 and those established by this board. Do we currently have any requirements established by this board other than?
I think that's verbose. That's just language.
Okay.
Your requirements for the charter school, you don't have any local control.
No, I got that. I just wasn't sure if there were any that I should now be referencing as I'm.
Well,
reading
as
through
a
the
matter of
policy.
fact,
Other than what was in the.
yes,
the
there is
AG
one.
that you sent,
Well, actually,
so-
there is one. So it is actually the other one that's on here, policy 130. So that would be your other policies.
Okay, well, yeah, I just wasn't sure if there was some other, when I read the policies and then there's a reference to something, I always like to go to the reference and then read the reference so I better understand what it's,
Right.
what it's pertaining to. So I had a question here. Are there other requirements established by this board?
Not beyond Act 22
Okay.
specifically,
All right.
but the board has in place, and when we get to 130, we can talk about how extracurricular participation is impacted by this law as well. So that's really still a state requirement. But the one thing I would, even though this one says date adopted is 1999, this is a case where it has not changed.
Yeah.
The charters, the only thing that has happened to charter schools is they've expanded charter schools to include cyber charters. But it hasn't done anything to the original law because the state is in total control of the approval of cyber charters. The reason that the charter school law was put in place is that, and Frank, this is before you were on the board, and I think for you, Monica, as well, we actually had a charter school come to us and we went through the applicant, everything that's in here we actually had to do for somebody that made application to start a charter school within our geographic boundaries. So this is exactly what we followed. We denied that charter at that time, which we have the right to do. They had a right to appeal, they didn't. But that whole thing is connected to this law. This has not changed in any substantive way that we're aware
Right.
since 1997. Actually, 1997 is the original, that was the year that that they don't call it, it's called the charter school law for short, was passed. So all of those citations that you see there, School Code Section 17, is how they amended the school code at the time to reflect the charter school regulations. And then all of these legal citations have to do with other, again, that's the law part. We'll turn that over to Subers just to make sure that's still consistent. But unless he says there's some, I mean, this is the law put into policy form.
Okay,
I mean, I don't know if you need any
And I'll
clarification.
check, like I have a copy of Governor Mifflin's, and theirs was first adopted in '05 and revised, reviewed in '08, and it's all the same verbiage that's in ours and our AG.
Yeah,
There's no changes.
yeah. I mean, I'm fine with it.
I mean, if there's anything, again, our last step of the process is always the legal review, because we obviously are not attorneys, but it's our assumption that, I mean, this administrative guideline is, what, 11 pages?
Right.
So, I mean, there's a lot there that, and it all has to comply with the, and this was, it looks like these were passed the same night, February 22nd.
1999.
So, what, 14 years ago already? So, but it's interesting that the law actually was passed in '97. I remember when it happened. And I've been around too long if I remember that, but that's true. I do remember this. This policy actually came 2 years later. So when the first charter school law was passed, there really wasn't a whole lot of action on charter schools. But anyway, if there are no changes, and the one thing that we will not do, if there are no changes, we can just stamp date last reviewed, and it does not have to come to the full board. Unless you choose to just show it to the board as review.
No, I mean, we could.
Legally, you don't have
I mean,
to do
we could-
anything
we-
with it.
Yeah.
All you're doing
In a
is,
status update to the board, we could just mention we've reviewed these and there were no changes.
Okay.
We don't have to even, waste much time with that.
128, again, there's no changes to this. I compared ours to, again, a couple of districts, Phoenixville and Twin Valley, who passed theirs in '03 and '02 respectively, and ours is, they have not revised or updated theirs. So we'll be a step ahead of them, I guess, again, just reviewing this, but Dr. Otto's not aware of any changes in the law in regards to this.
this is actually very similar to special ed. This comes, it's a federal program that is then implemented at the state level, and then obviously at the second tier is at the local level. But the cases that you see there, I mean, this one goes all the way back to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Plyler versus Doe case, I mean, I've actually, in my work as an adjunct professor, I discuss these cases with students who are studying to become school administrators, so I'm very familiar with these laws. This is actually just the implementation of those Supreme Court cases, so I'm comfortable with the way this one's written. This is really not that old.
Okay.
And I believe it to be compliant with what we need to be doing.
130, and by the way, I made a note just so I could tell you, 129, it's not on here, but the non-discrimination in Title I, that was last reviewed in September of 2012, so that was just done this past September. That's why it's not on the list.
Great. This one's pretty recent too. Well, 2008, 4 years old. That's not that old.
This one we
Right.
passed that would have been my third month here.
We didn't see any need to change anything here, and comparing it to other districts, theirs is also the same verbiage. We did, I don't know if Dr. Otter wanted to bring this up about the charter request by some charter school parents that want to take a class that is held during the school day, and
The parents want to take the class or the
their
students?
children.
No.
Sorry.
What we're finding now with the proliferation, I'll pick it up from here, Bill, the proliferation of cyber charter students, as we've represented with our budget, I mean, that's starting to skyrocket because the number of kids going into these cyber programs is starting to grow. What's happening is there are still some courses that I think are better taken in the actual setting, and some of the cyber families are asking the school to do that. I don't believe we're under any specific obligation to allow them to do that. But I think it runs counter to us as educators to say no to an educational experience. So it becomes kind of a double-edged sword.
Why wouldn't we treat that like you would with the sports?
Well,
That's what we did.
That's what we've started to do, but we don't, quite frankly, we don't have any policy regulation to do it. But in the limited cases that we've done it so far, the cyber charter schools have been compliant with us, giving us a certain, see what happens if you look at policy 130, we can charge the cyber school, and then they ferret us back just the cost, just to cover our costs. Well, we're thinking because we are, quote, losing part of our subsidy, actually all of the subsidy for that child's following that child to the school. If they're coming back here, it's our feeling that some of the money needs to come back too.
Yeah.
So that's where we're headed. We don't have it written in a policy. We're thinking that maybe we should either amend this to do that or come up with a separate 130.A policy that says we will, if you want to invite yourself to take, say, let's just say for a certain student, taking Algebra 1 cyber-wise just doesn't fit their learning style. They would rather be in a classroom with a teacher. If we have the room, if we have the space, and we want to invite the kid in, but say, you got to get your own way here, you have to follow school rules and regulations, you'll accept the grade that we give you, blah, blah, blah. If we control all those aspects of it, the only thing that we have to answer is how much we're going to charge them for it.
Well, can I give them the middle school
Sure.
example? I forget the name, you don't need the name of
Yeah,
the
the
parent
family's
or child,
important.
but middle school band and trombone lessons that the student was taking. So a cyber school kid, and we worked out the price, Danielle and I, the teacher, their benefits and everything, and how much that teacher was making.
An overhead price.
The period of time, just like you do for athletics, the period of time during how much of the day or in a cycle or a week is band taught, and how many kids are in the class. So the band price came out to be $59.
A session or
Session.
$59 total?
Total.
Oh,
What?
Total.
that's not much.
You would think it would be a lot more. Now,
Well,
the
proportionately.
based on.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say,
And
you're
that's
not going to
why,
get your
I
point
mean-
out because Andrew can't get past the,
Well,
the dollar
and
number.
that's the thing, if we come up with a policy, the formula can be developed by
See, the formula is our own homemade formula.
Yeah,
We
no, I
didn't
got
have
it.
a formula, but that's what we came up with. Now, the trombone lessons are only 3 kids taking it. So, and the amount of time, actually, the trombone instrumentals were taking place more in a time frame than band was. So the charge was going to be close to $1,200. The cyber school said, that's ridiculous, we're not paying that. I said, well, okay. Well, then the child can't take it.
See, this is, to be honest with you, I think we're on the cutting edge of some financial discussions that are going to go on between public schools and cyber schools as this this is going to continue to happen.
Right.
There's going to become a blend. And school districts, as you know, as we fight our tough budget battles, are going to be watching we're saying, we're representing you in public that $800,000 to $900,000 of our money is going out the door, but yet the students that are taking that money with them, which they have the right to do, that's the portability in the law, they want to come back here now, but their money's not coming back. Well, that's not going to sit well with people.
Right.
So there's going to have to be some discussions about that, and I think that's what's happening with the law now, as you hear a lot of this clamoring, we need to fix the cyber charter funding, and it's not fixed yet. So we're all kind of in this murky area of just, I hate to say it this way, but we're kind of making it up as we go. And we're trying to come up with some homemade formulas. We have one in policy here for extracurriculars frankly, it was arbitrary. We made it up. It
Well, the
was
one in
a formula.
extracurriculars is what's the total cost of sport
Right.
divided by the number of students,
Right,
and there it
boom.
is.
Right.
It's gonna vary, like Danielle and I sat down and we took, okay, how many periods in a day at the middle school? And so how many, and then I found out, talking to Mr. Hurley, that, well, they're really, they didn't meet, band doesn't meet as regularly as the instrumentals, as a big group. So it ended up, that's why it ended up being less. So we thought, and I forget it all the details, but we thought it was fair when we applied the same formula to the trombone lessons. They were okay with the $59 for band.
Of course they were.
Well, I think, well, I would want to work on the formulas. Let me just put it that way. My quantitative side is itching right now because I think
Well, when he told me they didn't want to take the 1,200, I wasn't too happy about that either. But I didn't want to deny the kid.
I think
That
there's
would mean
another
I
way
had
to do it. You
say no
can
to
sit
the
there and
kid.
say, what's our hourly rate for a teacher, a substitute teacher? I mean, how do we do the summer school programs, right? You say, it's going to cost us, pick a number.
Well, you predict your overhead costs and do the math.
What's the hourly rate? And you're going to charge that hourly rate. You're not going to, you may not necessarily divide that amongst 17 students for that one teacher, but you may say, look, the hourly, if you were to go take this class somewhere else in the private sector, it would cost you,
X.
pick a number, $100 an hour.
Right.
Right.
You know, and we are, and so we're going to take that because we have overhead and everything else. I mean, we obviously have economies of scale here that would reduce the cost for someone to take a program here, but it can't reduce it down to $59 for an entire semester. I mean, that's.
That'd be,
Well,
that'd be a good topic to put on the
Yeah, we
finance
didn't
committee
take the
agenda.
cost of,
I mean,
whatever
$59.
whatever instruments, whatever.
Yeah, I'm just saying though, like
The
$59
program.
for an entire semester. I mean, you're.
Well, you know what we can do when it's so minimal, we can always establish, like if you would do your formula, and your formula, it really does, your actual cost does say only 50. Now, you might say, look, we have a minimum cap. You're not paying less than $250 or whatever it is. So you don't get into those circumstances. Because if you do have a formula where somebody's coming in for just one session a month, you're going to have a hard time justifying $1,200 for the year for that. So I would suggest, and I'm just brainstorming now, we establish, it's like when a contractor comes in to do a tile floor in a tight area, they say, you know what, my minimum is $500. I don't care if you're only spending $20 on tile. This is a $500 job.
Well, what that doesn't do, though, is it doesn't take in the rest of your overhead. And the rest of your overhead is the buildings, heating the buildings, your facility costs.
Well, that's true.
There's
You could
more
make a
to just the
guesstimate of
direct
that.
labor. You're providing a classroom, you're providing computers, you're providing maybe
Yeah,
instruments.
We didn't get into all that.
You know what I mean? So there has to be an overhead factor and everything else that's built into the hourly rate that goes beyond just labor costs. And so that's something we can talk about in the finance
Yeah,
committee.
But if you're
I think it's a good
interested in
topic to put on the
pursuing, it's our recommendation that we at least begin the conversation for a new extension
Yeah.
to this policy. This is okay, but it doesn't address, because I said to Bill today, I said, oh, that's in policy. He says, no. Only extracurriculars in policy. And I said, yeah, you know what, you're right. Because where we actually stole the idea was we were having a conversation with another school district, and I'll just, because we're in the public, I'll just keep them out of the conversation. But we kind of stole the idea from them because they said, oh, well, we're charging this kid for, taking an Algebra 1 class. I said, how are you doing that? He said, we're just doing it. He said, and I said, is the cyber school paying? He said, yeah, they're paying us. I said, all right, there's money in them
Well,
there.
no, look, I think it's a legitimate concern. I mean, if someone's taking $14,000 out of the school district to go to a charter school, I mean, isn't that what the pay ratio is per student?
Well,
here?
it's 10 grand for
All right.
regular ed and
10 grand for
about
regular ed,
18
so
for
whatever it is.
special
So,
ed.
$10,000 leaving the school district to go to charter school, and the charter school has to pay us $59 for a kid to take a lesson here, if they're going to take a curriculum of 8 classes in a year or whatever it is.
Right.
And so $10,000 goes to the student over here, but we're getting $56 back when it comes to take one out of 8 classes.
I see your point.
That doesn't make any sense. It should be like $1,000 or $1,200 coming back to us
Well, see,
to
this
take a
is-
class here.
First thing, philosophically, I'll make my comment. We are sharing in the education of that child, so then we should share the cost.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we want some of that money back. That's the first thing.
And you have to also build in your overhead. I mean, we have debt.
Absolutely.
We have facilities
Absolutely.
costs. We have all kinds of things that make up our budget that go into educating a child. So those things need to be incorporated in our direct labor costs.
But the
as well.
second thing I would say is there's very little, if any, direction or regulation that I know of from the state. This is kind of a moot issue in terms of any regulation from PDE on how to, quote, charge people for this, other than I think you can. I don't think there's anything that says you can.
You charge what the market will bear.
Well,
So,
so we'll go back and we'll start doing some research. Maybe we can take the wording from here.
I'm just thinking off the
Because
top
the
of
one
my
thing
head.
I don't,
Yeah, it's got me thinking too.
It's
The
a
one thing-
revenue stream.
It's
Think about, I mean, as a revenue stream, like my kids, for example, go to private school, and there's certain things the private school can't provide that
Well, it'd be the
that
same
public
theory.
school does. So, as a parent of a private student, could I approach the school district and say, well, gee, I would really like my kids to take whatever, because the private school.
I'm thinking it's even different than that. I'm thinking we've got a point where we've got a price list of
Yeah.
all those things, and we go to the charter school and say, hey, by the way,
Right.
you know, like we solicit them to say, we've
Well,
got these
every-
to offer. You want to sign anybody up?
well, that's
Every
actually,
student
that's
in the school district. I mean,
that's-
every child in the school district, we provide with that menu, and you say, here's the menu. So if you want to bring your kid back and we've got room for them for that one particular thing, it becomes a revenue generator for the school district. I mean,
and if
you're-
you
But
remember,
before that, I think, I'm sorry, Dr. Arnold.
well, no, if you remember, I had brought up to the Revenue Enhancement Committee the possibility of doing our
own cyber charter school.
But I've held off on that because I want to see what the state's going to do,
Right.
because there's this talk of maybe cutting the reimbursement
And then-
in half. Then it's not cost
It's
effective
not,
anymore
right.
for us.
But I think first the formula is a discussion at finance. And then REC can figure out, well, how do we...
Well, ultimately, you
how
have
do
to
we-
put a policy
How do we go
together.
out there and
Ultimately, you give
Sell
us
it.
the authority through a policy to show the cyber charter. You want to send this person here? They've because you know what happens. It's not the cyber charter that sends the kid here. The kids want to do this, and that's why I say, as an educator, it becomes very difficult for me to say, "Oh, I'm going to deny you an
no,
educational
like I don't
opportunity."
think. Look, this is a public school funded with taxpayer-funded money, and everything about it is, you know, it's about the community educating
Right.
their children. So I don't think children should be denied services here if they're willing to pay for them.
Correct.
So you know that those funds need to come back because it has to be paid for somehow or
Right.
others. And to that degree that we can accomplish that, then I mean it's one thing if a class is full. The class is full. It's another if we've got capacity.
Well, see, the one thing that we don't do, and this is because it's been in the regulation, we don't charge homeschooled children anything. And let me explain why. No money leaves with them. We were never getting reimbursement for them. So that's an important distinction that in the course of the conversation you might hear. But cyber charter school kids are Daniel Boone residents who are on the public school rolls for monetary purposes, and then their money follows them out the door.
The state-
Homeschooled kids are not on our rolls. We are getting $0 for them, other than their parents paying for their taxes if they're residents and they're homeowners in the community. But there's no direct money that we're getting in our state funding for any homeschooled child whatsoever. So we do have a policy on that, and I believe it's consistent. If you're a homeschooled child and you want to come in and take an algebra class, math and science, seem to be the ones that are hard to find out in the open market. So they come in and they want to take those because there's good instruction, good facility, blah, 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 for whatever reason. And that's all they want to come in and take. And we say, only if it doesn't require us to incur additional costs for homeschool children. For cyber school children, I believe they have money that's going out. Some of that money needs to come back because now we're once again bearing part of the burden for their education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. All right, so we've got some homework to do for finance and.
Well, we'll start to, we can call the district that I mentioned and find out if maybe they've already put together some kind of formula because I had to charge them something. So maybe we don't have to reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah, maybe not, but I still think we need to
I
be
think he
comfortable
did
with the
have,
formula.
we kind of went on what he told us.
Oh, okay.
He didn't do all the overhead. He didn't.
But I think that's a good point. I mean, that's something we probably missed. We have, 65% of our budget staff overhead. We can start finding ways to. It might become interesting to see what the cyber schools would do in terms when we send them these bills, whether they're going to. I think they want to cooperate, and I'll tell you why now. Because I think they are probably getting more money than they actually need to operate their programs. That's the big criticism right now of the cyber charters, that we're sending them $9,000, but it's really only the real dollars that it's costing to educate that child for the cyber charters is about half that. So as that discussion continues at the political level of the state, it may have some impact on what we can do as well. Because if they wind up reducing that amount, then I think the cyber schools are going to start saying, hey, no, wait a minute. We'll be less inclined to want to give you back some of that
Yeah,
money.
but even if they're making, pick a number, let's say they're getting half that, maybe they're getting $5,000 from the school for a student.
Right.
And the student wants to
Take an
algebra course. Now that family's, if the cyber charter school isn't going to cooperate, the family's left with a decision to make. Is it more important for my kid to attend Daniel Boone?
For that
and the
class.
money, that $5,000 will follow the kid back to Daniel Boone, or keep him
portion of
here,
it.
and I got to figure out some way of finding a substitute for algebra, a tutor or something else. And I think what will happen is you're going to see those cyber charter schools take a deep breath and say, okay, well, we're willing to pay X for you guys because we don't want to lose the rest of the subsidy, and we don't want to lose that student, overall. And so there's lots of different ways to skin the cat, and you can take a look and say, kids take 8 classes a year, right?
Yep.
Something like that.
Not quite. At the high school?
Yeah.
Not quite. I mean, there's 8 periods, but that doesn't mean they're taking 8 classes.
7 classes. You can do it $10,000 divided by 7, and that's what you're charging for a class.
I think we just come up with a fair and equitable formula. I mean, I see. The $1,200 for the band. I didn't think that was unreasonable, but there was a little pushback on that one. So it was either that or the kid got denied the opportunity. So on a small scale for 3 or 4 kids, right now we're not talking any major loss. But having a vision that this could turn into 50 kids in a couple of years, then it has bigger implications.
Well, if you're only going to charge someone $59, it's going to go around.
Yeah.
And we can go back for $59. For
Yeah.
Yeah. What I pay for piano lessons, $75 for 30 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Well, don't put too much stock in that 59. That was one case.
There was, I'm just saying,
but that's
still,
what people go out
We
and
did
say.
like your $1,200 number.
I like your $1,200, yeah.
There was over.
I was like, wait a minute, $59 an hour or $59 period? I was like,
Yeah.
$59 an hour sounds reasonable. $59 for the entire semester, my God.
So to make a long story short, on 130, that policy I don't think needs touched. That's really just
For the AG.
for the AG. And that, if you notice, we passed that AG 2 years after we put the policy in place because we started to get a few people that asked. At first we didn't. And then we responded to this 2 years later. There's a 2-year gap in the actual original passage.
I'm thinking application fee now. Some application.
There's Monica with
So
her
Frank, I know you're like at the end of your.
Yeah, we got one more to go.
So we can do this one pretty quick.
Yeah, really.
I just have one quick comment about this one, and it's just item number 3. If you follow that down, there's a paragraph that any animal. Where is it? Any animal. It's just no. Let me see. Oh, domestic dogs and cats should be vaccinated against rabies and either leashed or caged. Should we make that 2 paragraphs? And the first paragraph say domestic dogs and cats must be vaccinated against rabies. I mean, shouldn't we make sure that is the case? It's
I
just a
agree.
comment,
Yeah.
and then a second paragraph saying that they should be leashed or muzzled or caged.
Yeah, however you want to. This policy has no school code connection other than you can have a policy on animals in the schools. There's nothing in the school code that says we just did a little
prevent a
research,
bite
and I didn't even remember why. This is just 2 years ago, but we were finding that elementary teachers were really not doing their due diligence and taking care of them, and some of it was falling to custodians to take care of pets. And we said, you know what, that's it. We're stopping this nonsense. So we found a PSBA model. This is the model, so we can certainly chop the words apart any way you want.
Well, plus if a kid, I don't know if when I was a kid, you had that bring your pet to school day or whatever. And,
Oh, we don't want to stop at that again.
Yeah.
Again, it's
but
just
you
the
want to
same
make sure
thing.
that everyone's vaccinated.
Right, I just
You
wanna
don't
make sure,
somebody
you know.
getting scratched and
And then ended up
Bit.
taking needles in the stomach for
6 months.
Right.
however long.
6 needles, I think, in one sitting, isn't it?
It's whatever it is. It's unpleasant.
Right.
Well, I don't know, can animals be brought into the same place if they don't have the Bordetella? like if animals are all coming into the same facility, because this just says rabies. I think there's something else you have to have if animals
It's
are
like
all.
that, for that kennel cough stuff, is that what you're talking about?
It's a
Yeah.
Bordetella or?
Yeah,
Because I know that
Bordetella.
they're supposed to have that.
Well, let us research that paragraph and see if there's any other, maybe the Humane Society or somebody can give us some background on what
That you could call a local vet and just
what good
list of
regulations
things
are
that they
for
would
dogs.
recommend.
Yeah. Well, the Animal Rescue League has a whole list of what you have to do
Okay.
if dogs are in a confined area together.
Or cats.
Or cat. Yeah, because the leukemia one might be in cats.
Yeah.
But that's all we have. Any questions
I
from the
don't have
press?
any more.
The present district policy prohibits any contact between students and school personnel via texting, emailing, cell phones, and social media.
Mhm.
Okay. What does the attendance office do? They have like a mom, or a dad. Attendance office, and the kid not called in, they didn't show up. With the attendance office, and who they call?
They call parents. Because if my son doesn't show up and a letter hasn't been given,
You get a phone call.
I get a phone call before the morning's up.
How often is that?
I don't know.
Okay, are we
What
completed?
do I need to know?
You're the chair. If you announce meeting adjourned, meeting is adjourned.
Any other comments on anything? Meeting is adjourned.